New column. John 18:38b to 19:16a. 19:16a. Get that again. 18:38b. What is the truth? Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them he is not guilty of any crime. But you have a custom of asking me to release someone from prison each year at Passover. So if you want me to, I'll release the king of the Jews. But they shouted back, no, not this man, but Barabbas. Then Pilate, Barabbas was a criminal. Then Pilate suggested flogged with a lead-tipped whip. The soldiers made a crown of long, sharp thorns and put it on his head. And they put a royal purple robe on him. Hail, King of the Jews, they mocked, and they hit him with their fists. Pilate went outside again and said to the people, I'm going to bring him out to you now. But understand clearly that I find him not guilty. It's a mess. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said, here's the man. When they saw him, the leading priests and the temple guards began shouting, crucify, crucify. You crucify him, Pilate said. I find him not guilty. I bet. The Jewish leaders replied.
Get on our famous YouTube and tell us how we pull it out. We
That's,
got to pull the fender thing out.
hey, 20 years ago you didn't have that, so don't complain. Don't complain. You could have had to take it to the shop. Look, you would have had to take it to the shop.
Take that sucker to the shop. They charge you $200-300 just to change the light bulb.
Facts.
You know how they do.
The Jewish leaders replied, by our laws, he ought to die because he called himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was more frightened than ever. He took Jesus back into the headquarters again and asked him, where are you from? But Jesus gave no answer. You won't talk to me, Pilate demanded. Don't you realize that I have the power to release you or crucify you? Then Jesus said, You would have no power over me at all unless it was given to you from above. So the one who brought me to you has the greater sin. Then Pilate tried to release him, but the Jewish leaders told him, if you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Anyone who declares himself a king is a rebel against Caesar. When they said this, Pilate brought Jesus out to them again. Then Pilate sat down on the judgment seat on the platform that is called the stone pavement, in Hebrew, the Gabbath. It was now about noon on the day of preparation for the Passover, and Pilate said to the people, here's your king. Away with him, he yelled. Away with him. Crucify him. What? Crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar. The leading priest shouted back. Then Pilate gave Jesus to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus and led him away, carrying the cross by himself. Jesus went to the place called Skull Hill, in Hebrew, Golgotha. There they crucified him. There were two others crucified with him, one on either side with Jesus between them. And Pilate posted a sign over him that read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. The place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, so that many people could read it. Then the leading priest said to Pilate, change it from the king of the Jews to, he said, I am the king of the Jews. Pilate replied, what I have written, I have written. It says exactly as it is. It states exactly as it is. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they divided his clothes among the four of them. They also took his robe, but it was seamless woven into one piece from the top. So they said, let's not tear it, but throw dice to see who gets it. This fulfilled the scripture that says, they will divide my clothes among themselves, and they threw the dice for my robe. And that is what they did. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother and his mother's sisters, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple he loved, he said to her, woman, he is your son. And he said to the disciple, she is your mother. And from then on, this disciple took her into his home. Jesus knew that everything was now finished. And to fulfill the scriptures, he said, I am thirsty. A jar of sour wine was sitting there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put it on the hyssop branch, and held it up to his lips. When Jesus had tasted it, he said, it is finished. And then he bowed his head and gave up to the Spirit. I read more than I was supposed to, but we'll continue that tomorrow. 2 Chronicles 29. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became the king of Judah. And his reign in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah, he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestor David had done. In his very first month of the first year of his reign, Hezekiah reopened the doors of the temple of the Lord and repaired them. He summoned the priests and the Levites to meet him at the courtyard east of the temple. He said to them, listen to me, you Levites. Purify yourselves and purify the temple of the Lord, the God of your ancestors. Remove all the defiled things from your sanctuary. Our ancestors were unfaithful and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They abandoned the Lord and his temple. They turned their backs on him. They also shut the door to the temple's foyer, and they snuffed out the lamps. They stopped burning incense and presenting burnt offerings to the sanctuary of God of Israel. That is why the Lord's anger had fallen upon Judah and Jerusalem. He made us an object of dread, horror, and ridicule. As you can plainly see, our fathers have been killed in battle, and our sons and daughters and wives are in captivity. But now we will make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, so that his fierce anger will turn away from us. My dear Levites, do not neglect your duties any longer. The Lord has chosen you to stand in his presence, to minister to him, and to lead the people in worship and make offerings to him. Then these Levites got right to work. From the clan of Kohath, Mahath, son of Amasai, and Joel, son of Azariah. From the clan of Merari, Kish, son of Abdi, and Azari, son of Jahal. From the clan of Gershon, Joah, son of Zimeah, and Eden, son of Joah. From the family of Esaphan, Shimri, and Jael. From the family of Asphah, Zechariah and Mattaniah. From the family of Heman, Jahiel and Shemiah. From the family of Jehuthan, Shemaiah and Uzziah. These men called together their fellow Levites, and they purified themselves. Then they began to purify the temple of the Lord, just as the king had commanded. They were careful to follow the Lord's instructions in their work. The priests went into the sanctuary of the temple of the Lord to cleanse it. And they took out the temple courtyard all the defiled things they found. From there the Levites carted it out to the Kidron Valley. The work began that day in the early spring. And in 8 days they had reached the foyer of the Lord's temple. Then they purified the temple of the Lord itself, which took another 8 days. The entire task was completed in 16 days. Then the Levites went to King Hezekiah and gave him this report. We have purified the temple of the Lord, the altar of burnt offerings with all its utensils, and the table of the bread of the presence with all its utensils. We have also recovered all the utensils taken by King Ahaz when he was unfaithful and closed the temple. They are now in front of the altar of the Lord, purified and ready for use. Early the next morning, King Hezekiah gathered the city officials and went to the temple of the Lord. They had brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 male goats as a sin offering for the kingdom, for the temple and for Judah. They commanded the priests who were descendants of Aaron to sacrifice the animal on the altar of the Lord. So they killed both. So they killed the bulls, and the priest took the blood and sprinkled it on the altar. Next they killed the rams and sprinkled their blood on the altar. And finally, they did the same with the lambs. The male goats for the sin offering were brought before the king and the assembly of the people who laid their hands on them. The priest then killed the goats as a sin offering and sprinkled their blood on the altar to make atonement for each of the sins of all Israel. The king has specifically commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering should be made for all Israel. King Hezekiah then stationed the Levites at the temple of the Lord with cymbals, harps, and lyres. He obeyed all the commands that the Lord had given to King David through Gad, the king's seer, and the prophet Nathan. The Levites took their positions around the temples with the instruments of David, and the priests took their positions with trumpets. Then Hezekiah ordered that the burnt offering be placed on the altar. As the burnt offering was presented, songs of praise to the Lord were begun, accompanied by the trumpets and the other instruments of David, the king of Israel. The entire assembly worshiped the Lord. As the singers sang and the trumpets blew, yeah, Master B trying to get me. Until all the burnt offerings were finished, until the king and everyone with him bowed down and worshipped the king. Hezekiah and the officials ordered the Levites to praise the Lord with the psalms of David and asked the seer. So they offered joyous praise and bowed down and worshiped. Then Hezekiah declared, "The dedication ceremony has come to an end. Now bring your sacrifices and thanksgiving offerings into the temple of the Lord." So the people brought their sacrifices and thanksgiving offerings, and those whose hearts were willing brought burnt offerings too. The people brought to the Lord 70 bulls, 100 rams, and 200 lambs for burnt offerings. They also brought 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep as sacrifice. But there were too few priests to prepare all the burnt offerings. So their relatives, the Levites, helped them until the work was finished and until more priests had been purified. For the Levites had been more conscientious about purifying themselves than priests. There was abundance of burnt offerings along with the usual drink offerings and a great deal of fat from the many peace offerings. So the temple of the Lord was restored to service. And Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced greatly because of what God had done for the people, for everything had been accomplished so quickly. Final reading is in Psalms 85. Psalms 85. Lord, you have poured out amazing blessings on your land. You have restored the fortunes of Israel. You have forgiven the guilt of your people. Yes, you have covered all their sins. You have withdrawn your fury. You have ended your blazing anger. Now turn to us again, O God of our salvation. Put aside your anger against us. Will you be angry with us always? Will you prolong your wrath to distant generations? You won't revive us again, so your people can rejoice in you. Show us your unfailing love, O Lord, and grant us your salvation. I listen carefully to what God, the Lord, is saying, for he speaks peace to his people, his faithful ones. But let them not return to their foolish ways. Surely his salvation is near to those who honor him. Our land will be filled with his glory. Unfailing love and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth sprung up from the earth, and righteousness smiles down from heaven. Yes, the Lord pours down his blessings. Our land will yield its bountiful crops. Righteousness goes as a herald before him, preparing the way for his steps. Amen. Somebody said fix my hair. This is my hair. This is how I woke up like this. I gotta take a shower now. You wanna see my pajamas? PJs. Love y'all. Till tomorrow. Blessed.